is a book that I have wanted to write for many years. I have always wanted to tell a story about a sharecropping family in the Mississippi Delta because my grandfather, Thad Scott, was a sharecropper. As a child, rather than playing outside with the other children, I lurked in the shadows among the adults, soaking up the stories they told, both good and bad. After hearing stories about Big Mama and Papa, my grandparents, and about life on a cotton plantation during the 40s and 50s, I secretly longed to write a book about it. Once it dawned on me that my family was familiar with the Emmett Till murder, I wanted to include that important piece of history into the narrative as well. Yes, I did experience racism as a child, but at the time I wasn't aware that it was racism. It wasn't overt racism, as I have documented in Midnight Without a Moon, but it was the subtle racism of rejection and segregation, which pretty much still exists today. And yes, I have and did experience racism as an adult, but it's the same as during childhood. The racism was, and still is, subtle. I've reflected upon many of my own childhood experiences to help me develop Rose's story and give it authenticity. I chopped cotton like Rose did, but only once. I had a best friend who was similar to Hallelujah Jenkins. The first funeral that I attended as a child was that of an old woman who left behind many adult children. I was self-conscious about the darkness of my complexion, so I tried to lighten it with skin bleaching creams. I looked forward to relatives visiting from the north. My northern relatives brought us clothes, but they were hand-me-downs, not new. My aunt and I really did dream over pretty dresses in the J.C. Penney, not the Sears, catalog. My great-grandmother had a tree stump in the middle of the floor of her living room, just like Miss Addie's. I was a good student like Rose, and I liked to read the newspaper, especially the comics. And my brother and I went to the mourner's bench at the same time, and we were baptized in a lake. Yes, it's possible that most of my relatives probably believed in staying in their place, as I have never heard otherwise. It was how they stayed alive and in good grace with their employers. I do know that I had a few relatives who were defiant and not afraid of their white employers. But I don't know whether I had any relatives who were like Aunt Belle, a true activist, however, which is why I created her. I wanted a different narrative than the one that was probably true of my real life family. I used names that were common among African Americans during that time period. And who was my favorite character to write? Aunt Bill's fiance, Monty, or Aaron Montgomery Ward Harris, was my favorite character to write because he wasn't playing. He just popped up in the scene and became very important to the overall plot. It was intriguing to discover what role he had to play. I love it when unplanned characters surprise me and pop up in the story. Which character do I relate to most? Rose, without a doubt. And what is my favorite part of the story? Such a hard question. I think my favorite part is the end, mainly because I have accomplished the goal of writing this very hard book. Second, I like how everyone is just sitting around being normal after the baptism and talking about things like Elvis Presley rather than being so concerned about all the troubles around them. I also have two cousins named Elvis, by the way. I hope the book will enlighten readers to the plight of African Americans in the Mississippi Delta during the time between the abolition of slavery and the start of the civil rights movement. I also want readers to fully understand the toxic, intolerant environment in which young Emmett Till found himself during that tragic summer of 1955. Never. My family used to tease me because I rarely even allowed anyone to babysit my children, let alone leave them behind like Rose's mother did. I should be writing the third book right now, but I'm a bit burned out, so the writing is slow. The third book will take us into the winter months of 1956, and I might consider a fourth book with Rose as an adult and an activist during the real civil rights movement of the 1960s. I began writing seriously after my first child was born. That was in 1994. It feels like a very long time ago. I had left my job in information technology to be a stay-home mom, so I decided to pursue my dream of writing a book while I took care of my daughter. And what inspired me to become an author? When I was in college, my professors usually read my papers out loud to the class. What I love most about this is that my stories would make my classmates laugh. I wanted to write stories that would make people laugh. However, ended up writing a story that makes people both cry and laugh. I hope. It took me a year and a half to write Midnight Without a Moon. And as far as drafts, I went back and forth revising the novel as I drafted it, so I only had one draft. After my editor acquired the manuscript, she and I revised it twice before it went to copy editing. And as far as research, I didn't keep count, but it was a lot, probably as much time as I spent writing the book itself. Yes, I wanted to quit many times, and I might have done so had it not been for a nice literary grant that I received from the Mississippi Arts Commission that year. I felt like I owed it to my state to finish the novel because they had given me money to support me in writing it. Because of this, I also felt compelled to have the novel published by a traditional publisher rather than self-publish it. And did I expect it to do so well? I hoped it would, but I am pleasantly surprised by the overall positive reception which it has received. I hope to someday write inspirational nonfiction. I'm currently published in several Chicken Soup for the Soul titles, but I would love to write my own book of inspirational stories. I would also like to write a devotional. And any ideas about another book? I would love to write a book about my 70s childhood, and perhaps a ghost story would be nice. I don't know the exact number of words or hours that I write since I don't have a daily writing schedule. I usually don't write for more than 2 hours on any given day, and the highest word count I've done in a day is probably around 2,500 words. I'm not a very fast writer, nor am I a very structured writer. unfortunately. But when I have to make a deadline, I will put my fingers to the keyboard and produce. And how long did it take me to get published? It took me over 20 years to go from wanting to write a book to getting a traditional publishing deal. But for Midnight Without a Moon, I wrote it in 2013 and 2014. It sold in early 2015, and it was published at the beginning of 2017. So 4 years from start to finish. I love creating characters, giving them personalities and backstories, and having people like you read about them. The Soul Brothers and Sister Lou by Kristen Hunter Latany was my favorite novel because it was the first novel that I ever read. I pulled it off the shelf at the school library because of the title. I checked it out and read it because it was the first time I realized there were books about children who looked like me. From it, I developed my love of reading. Phew, tough question. I love too many to pick a favorite. And my favorite author? Again, tough question. I admire too many to pick a favorite. Did I love reading and writing as a child? I loved reading, but I don't remember loving to write. I did, however, have a vivid imagination and was always lost in another world. Well, I guess that's still true. I still daydream a lot. No, I did not enjoy school as a child. I was bullied and I was an overachiever, which means I stressed out over my grades way more than was necessary. I got upset anytime I scored less than 97% on a test, and I cried when I lost at competitions. I'm not like that anymore. I gave up my overachieving perfectionist ways after I became a mom. Children will humble you like that. I didn't always want to be a writer. I wanted to be a teacher. So much so that I forced my siblings to play school all the time, and I was the teacher. I began my college studies in engineering because that's what others said that I should do. Then I changed it to education because more than anything in the world, I wanted to be a teacher. Next, I changed my major to math and computer science because one of my education professors said that teaching was unfulfilling and that teachers were broke. I should not have allowed him to sway me. But if I hadn't changed my major, I might not have ever met my husband, a fellow computer programmer, and I might not have ever become a writer because he is the person who encouraged me to write, and he still does. Luckily, I have also been a teacher. I have taught preschool, high school math, and college computer classes. Plus, I now homeschool one of my children. So I have been able to fulfill all of my career goals: math and computer science, teaching, and writing. Oh wow, so many people inspire me, but I'll have to say my mom because she survived raising 12 children, mostly by herself. The greater the obstacle, the more glory in overcoming it.